Hi guys, how you going? Thank you all for coming today. I'm super excited to be able to present to you all a bit of background on me. My name's Josh. I'm a software developer working at Sanofi in Paris. Originally from Sydney, Australia, but I moved over here about 4.5 years ago. Yeah, looking for a bit of a change and whatnot. I'm currently working on the platform team within the accelerator. I've been there for the past 18 months. And yeah, I'm super excited to share some of our experiences we've had at the accelerator, what we've been doing with Backstage, and everything like that. If anyone wants to get in contact with me, I put a QR code down below on this slide. Feel free to reach out. It just takes you to my LinkedIn, but happy to have a conversation, a chat, and whatever. If you're in Paris, come grab a coffee. Yeah, cool. So today we'll be talking about DORA metrics and what we've been doing within the accelerator around that. We built a plugin about 8 months ago for DORA metrics, and we started working with teams and different stakeholders to get an understanding of how it would work for them, how it would work for pulling in the data and everything like that. And I just wanted to be able to share a bit around the journey that we've been on for that. So things that we'll be covering today is what is DORA metrics and why we decided to use them, why we decided to build a DORA metrics plugin in Backstage, how our plugin works and the journey we've been on so far, how we felt like it's driven cultural change, and some of the lessons that we've learned along the way. Cool. So what is DORA? DORA metrics are a way of actually quantifying how your development cycle works or what your development cycle looks like, to frame it better. So it's split up originally in 4 different metrics and focusing on different aspects within the development cycle. So the first one looks at deployment frequency, which focuses around how often you're able to get a deployment out into the hands of your end users. How often is a team able to safely do that and things like that. Generally speaking, teams who deploy more consistently are able to get changes out faster, are able to be more dynamic. So that's something that we look for in a healthier team. In saying that, one of the things to look for in DORA metrics is never to think that it's a one-size-fits-all. Different teams have different legal requirements, different day-to-day requirements that they might have to go through. So when looking at these sorts of metrics, you have to understand that you treat them as a guiding light, but they are not uniform. And they're a way for teams to be able to talk to how they work. So deployment frequency is really important to understand that teams work in always different ways. Lead time for change. So this looks at how quickly you're able to get bodies of work out from the moment that you've actually started working on it all the way into a completed state. Next one is looking at time to restore service. So looking at how often, say for example, you've introduced a break and change, a break in deployment, your service is down or something like that. How quickly are you able to respond to that and get the service back up and running? And then finally, looking at the change failure rate. So looking specifically at how often you're actually deploying your service and how many times you're causing a failure from those deployments. And that's the way we've interpreted it. Different teams might interpret this different ways, but we kind of wanted to look at it as a percentage on how often we're actually deploying pushing out failing deployments, whether they're actually failing bugs or infrastructure related or anything like that. So why did we decide to build a DORA plugin in Backstage? We started with Backstage roughly around 12 months ago. We originally started with a proof of concept, a very bare bones proof of concept. If anyone started with Backstage before, you understand that what you get is a very limited feature set because you start with a catalog, the workflows and stuff like that, but it takes a lot of work to build this out. So what we wanted to do is come up with a way that we could build some awareness around Backstage for the accelerator, start to be able to present something back to the teams in the accelerator, something for them to be able to use and on a day-to-day basis, and also within their planning and stuff, but also something that other stakeholders can use. So looking at managers or project owners, scrum masters, everything like that. Trying to provide build a central platform that everyone can come to get information about different teams and build their understanding about how they work. And so we really saw it a good fit to build something in there for the group page for each team. So everyone has access to this. It's a real center point for us, and a really great way for us to build some awareness. So how does it work? This is what it looks like roughly. So we've got 4 different metrics that we use, as I described before. You have a way of configuring the actual what your deployment looks like. So for us, we use Jira and Datadog to pull out deployment information. So and Jira for actually pulling out like ticket information or bug information and stuff like that. Um, so within this, we allow them to configure, what the deployment branch might look like, what their in progress state might look like from Jira, what their different bug states might look like, or what they consider as a breaking change within their application in Jira. And then we go and use Backstage's proxy API to be able to fetch the information from the data sources, and then we do a bunch of calculations on top of that. Right now, we don't do any back-end processing. We want to do historical data, but we want to make sure that this is a good fit for us and it makes a lot of sense. So really right now, it's a quick snapshot that teams can use to be able to see what they're currently doing. But in the future, we want to be able to take this and make it reportable, give it to, anyone should be able to access this and see this sort of information and, use it in their planning or anything like that, any reporting and stuff. So the journey so far, it's been really interesting for us. We spent a lot of time chatting with a lot of different stakeholders. When we originally developed this, we got some really brutal feedback, actually. It was good because we needed it. One of the things we found were some teams didn't feel like the way we represented the DORA metrics were correct, and a lot of times they were actually right. So we went back to the drawing board and looked at how we can actually make it more flexible, using different deployment pipelines for different projects, using different Jira states and everything like that. And then also coming up with a way to be able to make it more flexible for them in the way that they represent, what a high performing team would look like as well. And we also wanted to try and surface a lot of the information that we're pulling. So one thing we found is teams got these numbers back and they were confused because they didn't know how we got to that number. They didn't have that number anywhere else, and we wanted to we needed to be able to come up with a way to provide more visibility around it and everything like that. So we went back to the drawing board again. We went and surfaced all the information, surfaced all the calculations, and pulled all that information up, made the actual plugin a lot more configurable. And we started getting more feedback about, teams actually like this. They like seeing the information. They could actually see, drill into which tickets were taking the longest. They could see, what deployments were causing their breaking changes and everything like that. So it's been really, really exciting. It's also been a great journey to delve into the Backstage plugin environment as well. It was a great learning curve for the entire team. So yeah, it's been fantastic. So how did this drive cultural change? For us, there was a lot of, as I said before, a lot of discussion that we had with teams around what these metrics look like for them. One of the best parts of this was that it did drive a lot of conversation with the teams. Teams, as I said before, they weren't so happy to see those numbers up front. But once we explained it to them and spent a lot of time educating around the fact that the DORA metrics are something that they can use as a guiding light for their workflows. It's something that they can use as a strategic choice from the development perspective. So, for example, if a team decides that they want to increase the amount that they're actually doing, amount of times they're doing deployments per week, or they don't see they have the same sort of legal requirements or business requirements that maybe a solid turnaround team would have, they can actually start to use these metrics as a reference point to see, okay, what can we change in our development cycle to actually make this work? One of the other beautiful things was the conversations that we're starting to have around different stakeholders within the business. I mentioned before we wanted to use Backstage as a platform for not only developers, but also developers, Scrum Masters, and all these different stakeholders. And starting to build this entire platform out and be able to present it back to each of those different stakeholders, it gives us a really great way of surfacing this information in a way that the business hasn't had this before. It's often quite opaque for businesses to understand how a team does their deployments, how they work on a day-to-day business. And being able to provide that sort of snapshot of information for them is actually really, really useful. The other great things is obviously driving awareness around how Backstage works and how we can pull this information and showing them the power of what it's able to do. And yeah, it's been fantastic. Some of the lessons we learned along the way, and these have been fantastic as well, looking at mostly around education for these sorts of things. You can't present raw numbers back to teams and not provide a really, really strong explanation about how it works, where you get the data from, what those individual data records look like, and making sure that they have access to them. Because you'll get a lot of questions and you get a lot of information, a lot of questions around what you've done and how you've done it and stuff like that. And so it's really important to be able to justify the way you've pulled this information, making things as visible as possible for them. The other things is looking at, the other factors that come into this, deployment metrics and DORA metrics. That is a framework that is not based around a specific tech stack. So one example I use is if you look at something like feature flagging, right? A feature flag might change the way that you perceive a deployment. You might deploy very frequently, very often, and you might push out a lot of different changes. But you might hide a lot of them behind feature flagging. So it's kind of tricky to actually be able to make sure that what you've seen in front of you is actually correct, from all perspectives of the business. From a developer, I've deployed my change, it's behind a feature flag, it's done. From a project owner, I don't see that change in production environment. I don't think that's done. So how do we represent that? And that's where we're going to go next. We really want to start looking at different ways that we can represent other factors that go into the development cycle. Feature flagging is one of those things where that will have a huge impact on your end user, and that's what we really want to focus on at the end of the day. The other part is looking at making sure that the data is accurate. So a lot of teams work in different ways and have different development cycles. If you're a team that's got a monorepo and you do a whole bunch of deployments using the same pipelines, how do you differentiate that? And coming up with different strategies to apply that was actually quite difficult. And making sure that they knew how to configure that properly and actually make it work for them. If anyone's used Backstage from a monorepo perspective, sometimes it can be a bit opaque in the best way to go forward. So we did spend a lot of time around that, and actually it's really helped us in the long term. So some of the future plans for the plugin, we would really love to be able to keep building this and make it use historical data. We want to be able to present this back to the business and present it back to all different levels of stakeholders so that they have an understanding of what our development cycles look like. And we really want to be able to make it so that teams have the ability to make strategic choices based on their data. On top of that, we want to try and make it more flexible. So we need to be able to take into account, as I said before, different factors around feature flagging, any other tech stack requirements they might have on a day-to-day. So some stuff that might actually stop them from deploying, things like that. Potentially, say for example, with Sanofi website, they can't deploy any changes because we might have to release publicly available information in the future. So how do we make sure that that's represented in our plugin and everything like that? Outside of that, we want to keep expanding and try and potentially turn this open source as well. So if anyone has any feedback or anything, feel free to let us know. More than happy to have a chat. I hope you guys all enjoyed this presentation. Thank you all for being here. Let me know if you have any other questions or anything, and I'm happy to have a chat about it all. Thank you.